Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second video. So today's video will be taking place in the Yuan Dynasty in China. Now this is around the 12 to 1300s, in place with module 3 where we talk about the plague. Now the specific artist I am drawing inspiration from this dynasty is Zhao. I think I said that right. Zhao Mengfu. I'm hopefully saying that right. And now this artist used calligraphy. Now during this time period, calligraphy was typically done with a brush. I do not have a calligraphy brush, but I do have some calligraphy pens, which is what I showed you a little bit earlier. To the side, I have a bunch of different tips. And so when looking at Mengfu's art, a lot of it had to do with very simple designs, a lot of empty space, and landscapes, almost kind of like still lifes, but with much less detail than we do today. And so first, I recommend, if you have multiple calligraphy tips like me, testing them out and, checking their different thicknesses, how they work, all of that, so that you can establish when you get to the actual section when you start your art, you actually know which ones that you want to use. So here's me, testing out all of them. I'm just doing it on the edge of my paper. And so the ink that I'm using is actually tattoo ink, watered down a little bit, because I don't actually have just like writing ink. So like I said, I'm doing what I can with what I have. The calligraphy pen that I'm using with the different tips, I got when I was like 10. And so, I didn't go out and buy it. I'm not, not gonna do that. Means are a little different. The brand is Wonder and Wise or Wheeze. And I think that they're pretty nice. I like the interchangeable tips. Very helpful. Now this actually comes with little cartridges that I no longer had, so I was just dipping it, similar to the style that would have been done at the time, dipping it in the ink. So now let's flip the page, I guess I tear the page, and start in our art. So I'm gonna start with the thinnest tip to start out my sketching. Now this art, there was no pencils. Well, there was pencils during the time, but I mean, they did not use pencils to sketch out and then like overline with ink. And so I'm drawing inspiration from his painting Twin Pines, and I am doing some rocks, a little bit of landscaping, a tree. Now I will not say that I am an expert in calligraphy, because I am not. However, the majority of what makes up this painting is the contrast between the blank space and the stark black. The lines are, they vary from very thin to very thick, trying to almost create the illusion of shadow at times without our traditional illusion of like light and shadow. It's not a soft gradient, rather a harsh dark color. So I'm starting off in the corner here, just sketching out my rocks. And the thing when you want to think about this is, if you're doing a landscape, do whatever landscape that you want. Maybe have a picture from a place that you just went to, or maybe you're even outside yourself. It is a perfect opportunity to not only relax, but enjoy the nature that surrounds you. So I'm just going over very slowly, sketching, the back and forth from the ink to the pen. Very tedious, and it takes patience, because I did get a little frustrated during this time. But it's also a nice exercise if you want to practice your patience. Now, to give some context to the Yuan Dynasty, it was established by Mongolian nomads. So they kind of ruled little sections of China, like now what we call China, in little pieces throughout the 13th century. and until 1368. So basically, their territory stretched in bits and pieces throughout Asia, even parts of Western Europe. And, there wasn't a lot of control that they had. Now, originally this dynasty was named the Mongol Dynasty, but it was renamed the Yuan Dynasty in 1271. And, as this dynasty changed, they set up a more Chinese-style administration. So, centralized bureaucracy, political subdivisions, taxation systems that were more rationalized. And it was the very first dynasty to make Beijing, which was called Dadu, at the time its capital. The Yuan rebuilt many different things. The agriculture and the architect were very big for them. Things like the Grand Canal and lots of roads were built during this time. Now, the Mongols, unlike a lot of China's rulers, were not totally synchronized. They weren't totally unified. And it was actually an important factor in the reason why this dynasty and the Mongolian Empire fell. They were very, very deliberate in wanting to be separate from native populations, foreigners, European travelers, that type of thing, which without unity, leads to a lot of things. In the previous dynasties, like the Tang and Song dynasties, art had been extremely encouraged, but it changed drastically for artists during the Yang dynasty, especially native Chinese who refused to serve the new rulers. Art had a dramatic shift during that time, and it was hard for them to seek inspiration, especially with what was going on in their world. A lot of painters saw in their art to return what was originally their home empire, what was, the basis of the old empire. Especially drawing from ideas of the Tang and Bai, I think I said it, Northern Song periods. So, there was no fixed ideal of painting during that time. And personal expression was held higher than, the overall look of, elegance, very put together. There was also a large emphasis on, very simple, very simple art and very contrasting art, light and dark, like I was kind of discussing earlier. That's why if you decide to take a look into this period, a lot of the art you will see is more simple, more, blank space with darker outlines or sketches. Now, I feel like it's very important to talk about, what does this have to do with our unit, Celeste? Thank you for asking. So, we take a lot of time, for this course to, as it is focusing more towards Renaissance art, which tends to be heavily geared towards European and the Western world. And while those figures and those artists and painters and sculptors are very important, we leave out so much of the rest of the world who was also going through their own art developments at the time. So Module 3, we were talking about, the time of the plague, which was about 1346 to 1353. And so as I was doing my research, I stumbled across this, which I found really interesting, as well as, the timeline had lined up. And it's interesting to think that, as this empire was shifting and changing, and especially their art world was going through a whirlwind of changes, there was a plague going on, on the other side of the world, on a whole other continent. And I feel like that's really important to understand that there's more to the world than Europe. There's more to the world than what we're taught. I hope that, this was fun, educational, you guys learned something. Hopefully I am good at doing tutorials. But feel free to stay along, and, calligraphy, do your calligraphy next to me if you were following along, or maybe this was just, you know, a video for entertainment or even education. I hope that it was, you know, entertaining, and yeah, have a wonderful day, you guys.